Hi there, it's Kevin with the Rogue Market here with a video topic about utilizing EDH Rec. We've talked about this before in previous videos, but I want to revisit the topic. And when is the best time to start moving on these particular cards that show up in EDH Rec as the most played cards from their respected sets? So if you do use your EDH Rec for MG Finance, I think this is the most important one. And it's all about timing. There always will be a time to invest in particular cards. You don't want to get in too early, of course, because the supply of people cracking cards for like either Pioneer, Standard, Modern is going to outstretch the demand of the cards that enter the supply for Commander. But eventually, Commander is the big format, but it's more of a trickle format. It's not one of those things where people just immediately buy into cards. It takes a while for people to see these cards being played in other people's Commander decks, and eventually the demand starts outstretching the supply for these particular cards. So each set, there's always a sleeper. There haven't been any exceptions. There have been cards that have been come out as along the bulk price, and they have just squeaked up and up and up. And today I want to talk about Theros Beyond Death because I think it's now the time to buy in a particular card from Theros Beyond Death. We're also going to look back at some of the other sets and see how well similar cards with similar amounts being played in Commander decks have aged over time. So let's start off first with the big set that had the Ravnica Allegiance was a special one because this set was actually open quite a bit for people chasing Hydroid Crises. I remember this one quite well. It was actually a hard set to keep in stock because the estimated value of opening a booster box when it was week 1, week 2 was actually greater than the price of the booster box. And so people were cracking these packs to find the cards and to just sell them. And there were a couple cards that were bulk price and now they have just squeaked up in value, mainly due to the fact that they do see play in Commander. And the first one was Smothering Tithe. Smothering Tithe had an interesting trajectory. It was a card that people knew was going to be crazy in Commander and it was going to go in basically every deck because of the ability for it to generate mana. But this one came out the gates around $4, and then people really started to see that it was seeing play in Commander, and this one had the price spike pretty quickly. So right before War of the Spark came out, this is after the booster packs, it's draft here, open. Okay, supply runs out because everyone's gearing up for War of the Spark, and boom, Smothering Tide just goes crazy. Now, it also got a reprint right here, so that's for the main reason for it going down from $9 to about $8. Also, you got to remember, this is the time period when Magic the Gathering crashed as a whole. So basically every Commander staple had a dip during this time period. Well, it seems like that dip is over. We're going through a good tax return season. I do highly suggest you start selling your cards because I'm expecting with the reprints in 2020 that we're going to see a worse summer into December season for MG Finance than we did last year. So I wouldn't be caught dead holding any equity from any metric, maybe for the exception of like Breakout, Pioneer, or Modern cards. Those are some you could probably hold on to, but every other thing I would highly encourage you to just get out of. However, that's a topic for another day. Let's go back to talking about what happened with Smothering Tithe. This was the big deal out of the set, though. This was the duh card. Now let's go back here and look at some of these other ones that have just crept up on us. The one that I really want to talk about is going to be Guardian Project. So you see that Guardian Project is having a TCG mid price of about $5.35 and a Card Kingdom price about $4.50. If we go over here to the Guardian Project, you can see that this was like, what, a 60-cent card at its low? I think it was like a 40 or a 60-cent card at its low. This was the card that came out really slowly and had that just natural. There was no big price spike. Just had that natural gain. Few cents here, few cents there. Well, a few cents over, a couple months. Now we're 4 or 5, 6 months, a year. It ends up being quite substantial. Now it's actually starting to increase a lot quicker than it has previously before because Ravnica Allegiance really isn't being open. So Guardian Project, I'll have to talk about why I think Ravnica Allegiance and Guilds of Ravnica is a great buy. Mainly the TLDR on that is it missed a lot of the reprints in Challenger decks that they skipped and went right to Throne of Eldraine. And so Throne of Eldraine hit that took that big equity loss, whereas Ravnica Allegiance and Guilds of Ravnica especially seem to have a lot of their equity intact. But again, that's another story or another topic for another day. Let's not get sidetracked here. So Guardian Project is the perfect example of what I want to talk about with some of these Theros and possibly even cards that are still from Throne of Eldraine. They have the ability to have similar trajectories. So we have kind of a baseline for Guardian Project. It's being played in about 16% of all green decks, which is, quite substantial. A few of these other ones have been, I think, are pretty good, notable cards that have the ability to go up. But you want to find a card with this sort of dominance and this sort of price point, and those make very, very good cards in the future for cards that are going to go up. I would probably cut off around this 7%. Because they will move up eventually, but they're going to be pretty slow, and you have a lot longer time period to invest in these particular cards. You want to find bargains for these. So these are the ones that I'll find stores on TCG Player or just outlets that are selling them for much lower. So for example, if you're looking at Simic Ascendancy, you can probably find these cards for a quarter if you look around. So you don't need to be as persistent in buying this card as you would something like Guardian Project, because I would be looking for deals for Simic Ascendancy, throwing it up on Cardsphere for a quarter, throwing it up on, there are sites allow you to be buy list too. That's exactly how I'd work with the Simic Ascendancy. All right, so we've got that kind of established. Let's go ahead and look at some other sets here. Guilds of Ravnica, let's look at War of the Spark. Let's see if any cards had these similar trajectories from War of the Spark. So we have the most played cards really being uncommons and commons from this set, and we have Time Wipe at 16% of all of Azorius decks. So if you actually factor that in, you have to give this a factor of 10, and so it's not 16% of decks. Azorius is a lot less represented in a monocolored deck, so that one's not the best example to look at. But we do have like Bolus of Citadel that gets quite interesting, especially with the spread between the $3.50 from Card Kingdom and the $2 on the TCG market price. So not really anything too interesting. War of the Spark, it also had a great deal of supply in comparison. So I don't know, Guardian Project is really the focal point that I would look. You can look back at older sets too and find very similar cards. So now let's go on to the topic of hand, which is where Theros the Beyond Death is coming to a close in its supply. It's going to not be opened as much. One of the massive problems with Theros is we had a huge increase in supply of Collector's Edition, which added to not only the specialty cards, but just rares in general, really got flooded into the market. It seems like that is now coming to a close, and so now it's finally a time period where the Commander cards will begin to go up in value. So first off, the cards that are seeing the most is the Dryad of the Elysian Grove. I do believe that this is at its lowest right now, but the price point is still pretty high in comparative. I actually think that Thassa's Oracle is more interesting than Dryad. They see it play in about the exact amount of decks, and Thassa's Oracle also is hitting a tier 1 deck in Pioneer, and has also even started to see play in Modern. However, Dryad of this Elysian Grove has seen play in both those formats as well, so I don't want that to distract you away from the fact that Dryad of Elysian Grove will be a good card long term. It's just really the price point of both of these that I typically don't like to invest in. They tend to be a lot more swingy, have a lot less returns than going into the lower end cards. So we kind of go down the list. We have like the Nyx Bloom Ancient too. The price point this is quite high. Underworld Breach has Pioneer. It could easily be banned in Pioneer. Don't want to invest in that because it's just something that's quite volatile. And then we do have the Calyx, but you got to think that this is Celestia. 13% of Celestia decks. That's something that is not comparing apples and oranges. We get kind of interesting with Thassa Deep Dwelling with 12%. But then we get to this big haymaker here, which is Heliod's Intervention. This is right now, I think that Heliod's Intervention is the best card in Magic the Gathering to sink some money into. I've invested in about 50 copies. I'm not really in the market. I'm in the market of selling cards, not really buying cards right now. We have a lot of growing pains right now at our store. We just invested in the security system, want to make some other changes. So capital is something I don't have a lot of free of right now, but I'm still going to give my advice on the market side of things for the Rogue Market channel. And if I did have a lot, did want to play the game right now, I'd be sinking a ton into these Heliod's Intervention, because I think this is the perfect card, and I actually think it will see more than 11% dominance in decks to come. So first of all, one of the big themes in white is going to be life gain. Target player gains twice X life. You can gain a lot of life in EDH. Now, there are a lot of other ways to gain life, probably more efficient than this, but I have to also talk about this target player. If you actually go back in the history of Magic, and especially Pioneer Forward, there isn't a lot of cards that target a player to gain life. A lot of them say you gain life. And so there is some little combos that there's a couple black cards that say whenever an opponent gains life, they lose that life instead. A couple of Rakdos cards as well that I could actually see Heliod's Intervention uses a combo piece in those casual janky decks. So it's got the demand from there, but it also just has the demand from life gain white decks. But ignoring even this last factor, which is just a plus, just an add-on to this card, we have the ability to destroy X target artifacts and or enchantments for just the low cost of 1 per artifact enchantment. This card is a powerhouse, which I would suggest that every white deck in Commander run this card. Yeah, there are many alternatives to this card. There is just a 4-mana spell that destroys 2 target artifacts and enchantments. That's an uncommon that is what, like $1 or $2? These type of cards, they have to reprint like crazy. Just the, destroy 2 for 2 mana, which is the exact same cost that this one ends up being, but then this one scales even higher. This one really reminds me of cards like Vandal Blast that, got up to what, $4 at one point before it was reprinted, and this is a rare. So Heliod's Intervention with just that clause, with the plus of not only gaining life, but forcing a player to gain life, I could see this card being a very, very highly sought after and played card in years to come. And the price point is just ridiculous for a card this powerful. So that is my comparison. Like, it's not quite like Guardian Project numbers right now. There's a big 5% difference, but I actually think that this card is more versatile than Guardian Project. Some green decks don't care about, most do care about creatures, but there's a lot of competition for Guardian Project. They seem to put out one per set that really draws you cards. And yeah, a lot of decks do enjoy Guardian Project in them. It's a very efficient way for 4 mana to start drawing a lot of cards. But again, it does have a lot of competition in its space. And it's already, the price point now has gone, through the roof, that I think it's going to be a little bit of a settling on this particular card. So that's my analysis of Heliod's Intervention. This card is something you should not be waiting on. Again, for full disclosure, I get a lot of people accuse me of, buying hundreds of thousands of copies. I don't have that type of capital free up at the moment. I've invested, for transparency's sake, I think like 40 to 50. There's 2 cards that I invest in. One was this, and one was the Enigmatic Incarnation, I believe is what it's called. The blue-green. Not even seen it here on EDH. I guess no one even likes to play. There it is, Enigmatic Incarnation, because I just think that at some point in time, and I got in for a super low price, like 12 cents. So at some point in time, I think Enigmatic Incarnation is going to see a deck in Pioneer. I think the power level's there. It gets better and better with more enchantments printed. Again, another analysis or story for another day. Heliod's Intervention, however, is a very, very, very safe spec. There are a few others that I think are pretty encouraging if the price point gets low. We do see the Citizen Champion starting to see a lot of play in Commander. It's powerful enough for like Pioneer and Standard. And it's also pretty neat that like this Atherosh, which was a buy a box promo, is getting down to like rare price and does see in 10% of the Orzhov. You can even go down and see like some of these other cards are seeing quite substantial bit of play. The other one I think around when we talked about that 8% is probably the threshold for bulk cards is the Archons of Sun's Grace. Unfortunately, this did see a standard deck, so people have that on their radar for standard. I believe it was a 2 of in the winning deck for the last Mythic Championship, one in the main, one in the side. So this card wasn't able to get down to that bulk price. The other card that I would really take into consideration is another Intervention. Nylea's Intervention does seem to be pretty good because of the fact that you can search your library for up to X lands. So especially into black, but many other decks, this is actually a pretty powerful ability because it can go get the combo pieces for lands. So we're talking like things like the Thespian Stage or the Vesuva, and then cards like Cabal Coffers and Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth. Both of those, I think, pair very well. So it'd be hard stretched to justify running a Golgari deck and not running Nylea's Intervention in that color pairing. But then it gets even better with other, utility lands you want to go pick up. If you're in like a Gyri Sanitarium deck, this can go get it, or simply other draw decks that can force each player to draw cards. I know the green is sometimes not where that color combination wants to be, but I mean, it's going to be a very, very potent card. Doesn't ramp you, but it does specifically get you those particular cards, and it has a lot of synergy with cards like Burgeoning and the Exploration. So those cards ramp you but don't get you lands. So this is kind of the missing piece for that, to sink a bunch of mana into and then drop a bunch of lands, especially Burgeoning. It just makes Burgeoning a lot better. And I think this card is really down the price point that I want it to be. So that's my analysis for Theros. Real quickly, let's go ahead and see if there is one that's still lagging behind from Throne of Eldraine, since I did promise that. Throne of Eldraine, though, does have an insane amount of supply. The one card that does stick out, though, is Return to the Wildspeaker. This card was bulk. It was one point one of the least expensive cards in the set, and it does seem to be now that card came as $1.50 on TC market price. 11% is pretty promising for a card like these green cards, especially. You got to think that there's a huge demand. There's a whole market out there for budget cards, and this card could just go up to the $2-3 mark just because it's the budget version of cards like the Guardian Project, where people are like, I need a draw outlet, don't want to spend $5 for a draw outlet, we'll just pick up a Return to the Wildspeaker. That would be my pick for this one. There's a few other ones that do seem pretty reasonable, but a lot of them have already gone up in value, and most of these cards that are also seeing play in Commander are also seeing play in other formats, and kind of the boat is sailed on those particular cards until rotation. So there would be my 3 picks right now: Return the Wildspeaker, the 2 interventions from Theros, and whatnot. So again, we're headed into a strong season. I would try to get out of all cards that have reasonably gone up since you invested in them, at least before June. I think June's your cutoff date before cards traditionally start to go down in value, and I'm thinking that this year we could see some massive losses in the singles market of Magic the Gathering, mainly because there's no end in sight to layers. There is no end in sight to reprints. We still have another spellbooks haven't been announced yet. I'm thinking another spellbook is going to come, which is, so we had Jason Gideon. I'm thinking like Chandra will probably be the next online to come out, or Liliana's spellbook. Just, we are in the year of the reprints, which is going to really tax the secondary market. What Magic the Gathering really needs to see is growth. And unfortunately, we've had some pretty bad decisions made, all the way from organized play to the tournament scene to everything in between, that has really stifled growth, really hasn't helped growth. Arena was their success originally, that they thought was just going to overtake like Hearthstone and really get people excited about Magic the Gathering. I would say that it, for a glimpse, did, but they've really, my worst nightmare came true. They really came complacent with MTG Arena. Nothing really changed. Like, there's been joke videos out that we got a friends list in 2019, and that was the upgrade. And so they really need to go back to the drawing board. They need to hire some more people that can so the designer, or the bugs and the implementation of new sets can all be taken care of with the leadership they have right now, or the employees they have right now, and they can actually bring on other people to do all the like knickknacks and things that will get people excited to keep playing Arena, because these dailies are quite boring. That's the sentiment that I've heard from many people, that Arena is just a boring grind right now that no one wants to really, feels more like a chore than actually playing a game. Again, video for another day, but if we do see, we'll keep an eye on the market. If we do see the growth heading into the summer season, I've been surprised in years to past. There have been years where I really thought we were headed into terrible seasons, and they've actually surprised me. There was a Christmas season. I'm like, okay, it's going to be a typical Christmas season where it's a buyer's market, and it was actually a seller's market. So we're going to keep looking at those and see what sort of a market into summer we're going to have. But my suggestion again is sell before June. Anyway, this has been Kevin with the Rogue Market. We're going to be back with our Rogue Roundups and the usual stuff that we have done. I know I've been quite lackluster on this channel, but it's just been busy running the other business side of my Patreon and my local store, and this channel is just taking a backseat. But no more. We want to get back into it. This has been Kevin with the Rogue Market. Thanks for watching.